I was the one who made the cranberry sauce from scratch. I basted the turkey, folded the napkins into fans, and tied little gold ribbons around each place card. Even printed their names in cursive like I always do. A soft tradition that made me feel useful, even as my hands sometimes trembled more than they used to. It was Christmas Eve. The tree glowed in the corner of my daughter's dining room, and my granddaughter, Ellie, had placed a tiny hand-painted ornament at the very top. A dove with crooked wings. She'd whispered that it was for peace. I had just set the last dish down when Richard, my son-in-law, raised his wineglass, laughing. Well, I think after New Year's we should finally look into that retirement home for Mum, before she burns down the kitchen or starts labelling the dog as Tupperware. Everyone laughed. Melissa snorted into her wine. Even Jacob, my own son, smirked before shaking his head. And just like that, they moved on. Another joke, another bite of stuffing, another memory to bury me in. I sat down in silence. Not one word, just that floating feeling, like the room had stretched farther than my voice could ever reach. Across the table sat a gift, a small square box with gold wrapping and my name in delicate handwriting. I didn't touch it. Instead, I reached for my glass and smiled, the kind of smile that smooths everything over. But inside, something closed. It wasn't rage, it wasn't grief, it was clarity. A door, soft, silent, just closed, and I knew, even as they passed me the mashed potatoes, that I wouldn't be here for the next Christmas, or the one after that. The sound of forks clinking against plates had faded, replaced by the murmurs of people shifting into the living room. Claire stood at the edge of the hallway, still in the dining room, collecting empty glasses and stacking plates with quiet efficiency. No one asked her to. They never really did. It was just assumed. She'd worn her cream cardigan that night, the one Harold used to say made her look like soft candlelight. Now it just felt muted, like wallpaper behind everyone else's colour. "Mum, just leave it," Melissa called over her shoulder. "The dishwasher's already running. Come sit. We're about to open gifts." Claire smiled thinly. "I will. Just a second." But she didn't move. The gift with her name on it was still on the table, untouched. Gold wrapping, red ribbon. No one had noticed. They'd opened theirs already. New earbuds, a leather wallet, a cookbook Claire had found at that little shop downtown. She remembered choosing them carefully, remembered the cashier asking if she wanted to include gift receipts. "No need," Claire had replied. "They'll know it's from the heart." Now, she gently picked up her own box. It felt weightless. Back in the kitchen, she rinsed the dishes slowly. Steam rose around her face like fog on a quiet lake. No one came to help, and she realised it wasn't that they didn't love her. It's that they'd grown used to her being a fixture, like the wallpaper, like the gravy boat, like the piano she used to play when Melissa was in middle school and still believed in magic. A home might actually be good for her, she remembered Richard saying, not at Christmas, but months ago when she'd forgotten to RSVP to a dinner. Somewhere where people can keep an eye. Claire wiped her hands dry on a towel, folded it once, then again. The lights in the hallway were dim. She could hear Ellie giggling from the den, that pure, high laugh that still gave her warmth, but the rest, it felt far. "Claire," someone called again. "You coming?" She looked towards the living room, paused, then, gently, almost politely, turned and walked into the quiet of the guest bedroom instead. No one followed. And that night, when the house finally went still, Claire sat on the edge of the bed and wrote one sentence in her notebook. "When people laugh about your ending, maybe it's time to write a new beginning." The next morning, Claire woke before anyone else. She always did. She moved through the guest room in silence, folding the covers, smoothing the pillowcases like she had in 100 guest rooms 100 times. Her fingers knew these movements like second nature, not because she was a guest, but because she had once been the host. The walls of the room were painted soft beige now, but Claire remembered when it was lavender, when Melissa was 13, and she'd begged for a grown-up colour. Claire had painted it herself. 2 coats, after work, one arm sore from holding the roller. She smiled faintly, remembering how proud Melissa had looked the next day. This is what mums do, Claire had whispered to herself back then. She used to pack lunches with handwritten notes tucked into every sandwich bag, paid for braces out of her own IRA without telling anyone, covered the down payment for Jacob's first home, selling the last car Harold had bought before he died. No one had asked her to. They just needed, and she gave. There were nights she sat by the stove long after midnight, watching soup simmer for a child who had the flu and didn't like the taste of medicine. There were mornings she left for work with dishes still dirty and eyes still tired, but the laundry folded, and holidays. Claire made magic, hand-tied bows, recipes from scratch, memory games by candlelight, and her house was where the stories happened, the remember whens, the mum's roast and grandma's tree, but somewhere in between all those years, they'd stopped calling her the centre and started treating her like the background. She's always around. She'll help. She understands. Even the family group chat had started being quieter. Less Claire and more we've got it handled. Claire walked over to the dresser and opened the top drawer. Inside was a hairbrush with strands of her silver hair still tucked into it, a perfume bottle nearly empty, a receipt from 5 years ago, Melissa's wedding catering, which Claire had paid in full. She ran her thumb across the paper. Was this my mistake? She wondered aloud, making love so quiet they stopped hearing it. She folded the receipt in half, then in half again, and tucked it into her purse. Claire sat at the kitchen table with her tea gone cold. The sunlight streamed through the window in long strips, landing across the countertop, where a few leftover cookies sat on a plate, the ones she'd baked, but no one had touched. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Melissa. "Thanks again, Mum. Make sure you grab the turkey pan before you go. I'm not sure where we'll store it." Claire stared at the screen. Not long, just enough. Then she clicked it off and placed the phone face down. There was a time when she would have responded with a thumbs up or a heart emoji, maybe offered to clean out the fridge too, maybe laughed at the idea of her beloved pain, like it was all a joke. But that morning, she didn't. She reached for her notebook instead. On the second page, just beneath her line from the night before, she wrote 3 words in her tidy script. Begin in silence. She opened her banking app, looked at the savings Harold had left her, still untouched. She clicked over to a property search website, not with desperation, with curiosity. A name flickered into her mind, one of Harold's old friends who'd once retired to a quiet town by the water. Then she flipped back to her contacts list, scrolled, paused, tapped on a name. Wendy, realtor, old choir. Claire didn't text. Not yet. She just hovered. There's a moment, she thought, where you can still change your mind, but the second step always comes after the first. And she had just taken the first. Down the hall, someone flushed a toilet. A door creaked open. Footsteps. Claire stood, gently returned the cup to the sink, and slipped her phone into her purse. She would join them for brunch. She would smile, nod, laugh at Ellie's jokes, but a part of her had already packed. Not physically, not yet, but emotionally. She had begun checking out. Claire stepped into the bank just before 10. The morning air still clung to her coat, and the bell above the door gave a soft chime as she entered. She'd chosen this branch for a reason. Not too close to home, not too new. The kind where they still offered coffee near the front desk and remembered your name if you came often enough. A young teller greeted her. "Good morning. Welcome to First Alliance. How can we help today?" Claire offered a calm smile. "I'd like to speak with someone about transferring and closing some accounts, quietly if possible." The teller paused. Not rudely, just unfamiliar with someone so precise. "Of course. Let me check who's available." While she waited, Claire looked around the lobby. A soft jazz song played through low speakers. 2 potted plants near the window had gone slightly dry. She used to water plants like that. In offices, in schools, in her own kitchen when Jacob was still in middle school and liked watching roots grow in water jars. "Mrs. Brooks!" a man's voice called. Claire turned. The name stung slightly. She hadn't been called that since Harold's memorial. The banker wore a navy suit, clean cut. "Right this way." Inside the glass-walled room, Claire sat down and gently placed her leather purse on the table. "I'd like to access all balances linked to the joint retirement account," she said, "and review the estate rollover options, discreetly." The man nodded and typed. "We do still have Mr. Harold Brooks on file. I'm sorry for your loss." Claire gave a practiced nod. "It's been 11 years. "Ah, of course. Let's see. Yes, the account is stable. Would you like to move funds into a separate beneficiary-controlled trust or hold temporarily?" Claire paused, then spoke clearly. "I'd like to begin the process of transferring everything to a private holding, under my name only. No alerts, no linked addresses." The man blinked. "We can do that, yes. It'll take a few steps." "That's all right. I'm not in a rush. Just ready." She watched her name appear on the screen. Claire Ann Brooks. For a moment, it looked like someone else. But it wasn't. It was her. Still here. Still deciding. The next morning, Claire called Wendy. They hadn't spoken in over a year. Not since the choir fundraiser at St. Luke's. Wendy had always been the one with the booming alto voice and a laugh that warmed a whole room. She was also a part-time realtor now, semi-retired, discreet. "Claire?" Wendy answered, surprised but kind. "My goodness, it's been too long." "I know," Claire said. "I was hoping you had a little space for one more quiet listing." There was a pause on the line. Wendy was quick but gentle. "Yours?" "Yes. I'd like it listed by January 5th. No open houses, no sign on the lawn. Just quiet inquiries, please. Does Melissa know you're doing this?" Claire's eyes flicked to the window. The snow was just beginning to melt along the fence line. "Number, and I'd like to keep it that way." Wendy didn't push. "I understand. Do you want to come in, or should I stop by?" Claire glanced around her kitchen. The wooden spoons in the ceramic jar, the magnet calendar Harold used to scribble reminders on, the piano in the corner, untouched for months. "Come by tomorrow. I'll have the spare key ready." The next afternoon, Wendy arrived with a leather folder and a warm scarf wrapped around her neck. "Same piano?" she asked, pointing. Claire nodded. "Hasn't moved since we carried it in." Wendy paused, then, gently, "I remember when you played You'll Never Walk Alone for the seniors' service. You made half the congregation cry." Claire gave a half smile. "I didn't mean to, it just came out that way." Wendy walked through the house with a soft reverence. She didn't ask her questions. She took photos, jotted notes, measured light. When she returned to the kitchen, she took the key from Claire's hand and held it for a moment. "Are you okay?" Claire thought for a long second. "I'm ready." "Not what I asked." Claire looked her in the eye. "I'm not angry. I'm just done waiting to be seen." Wendy nodded. No sales pitch. No pity. "I'll handle it like it's my own." As she left, Wendy placed a small folded piece of paper on the counter. It was the choir program from 1999. the last time Claire had sung solo. That night, after Wendy left, Claire stood in the hallway, holding the choir program. The house felt unusually still, not the kind of silence that follows noise, but the kind that had been waiting. She walked slowly to the bedroom and pulled open the bottom drawer of her nightstand, the one she hadn't touched in years. Beneath folded scarves and an old glasses case was a small wooden box, faded, a little chipped on the corner. Harold's. Inside, a photo from their 20th anniversary, the two of them dancing in the living room, barefoot. A handwritten grocery list, a scrap of music paper with 3 lines from You'll Never Walk Alone, and then a folded piece of stationery. Claire recognised his handwriting instantly. Don't fade, Claire. Let them remember you in colour. Love loud. Leave proud. You are not background. She closed her eyes, breathed in through her nose, and let the tears fall quietly. Not sobbing, just release. He used to say that after church when they'd sing too softly. Let them feel your note, not just hear it. She'd forgotten that part of herself, piece by piece, napkin by napkin, folding into the corners of other people's stories. She stood and walked to the piano. It hadn't been opened in months. She lifted the lid, pressed one key, middle C, then another. F, then the first 3 notes of You'll Never Walk Alone. Her hands trembled slightly, but her breath didn't. She wasn't trying to perform. She was remembering, not the woman they saw today, but the woman Harold had danced with barefoot. The woman who'd stood up at the PTA meeting and told the board off for cutting music funding. The woman who'd carried casseroles and grief at the same time, without applause. Claire played one more note. Then she closed the lid gently, walked back to her room, and wrote one more line in her notebook beneath. Begin in silence. Finish in full voice. Claire opened the door to the music room with both hands. The hinges creaked slightly, the good kind of creak, like the sound of something well-loved. Afternoon light spilled across the floorboards, illuminating the dust, floating in the air like glitter no one meant to spill. The upright piano stood quietly in the corner, its wood darkened by age, but still whole. Beside it, a small bookshelf sagged under the weight of sheet music, choir programs, and old photo albums labelled in neat cursive. This was the only room she'd never allowed anyone else to reorganise. Not Melissa, not Jacob, not even Harold. Claire ran her fingers along the piano bench, pausing at a faint scratch on the side. Ellie had made it, dragging a wooden puzzle across when she was 5, giggling and humming Do Re Mi out of order. Claire knelt down and opened the bottom drawer beneath the bench. Inside, a stack of handwritten arrangements, an old voice recorder, and one folded paper that made her breath catch. It was a copy of Somewhere Over the Rainbow, in Ellie's child handwriting, with rainbow-coloured crayons for each note. The F clef was shaped like a snail. The C was reversed. Claire pressed it gently to her chest, closed her eyes and smiled. That soft, aching smile only certain memories can earn. She didn't cry. She just folded the paper and set it aside in a small pile marked Keep. Then she stood, pulled out an empty box, and began sorting. One drawer at a time, one binder, one echo. She placed the choir medals into an envelope, removed the tiny lamp Harold had installed just for her, dusted off the music stand. Everything else into the donate bin. It wasn't that she didn't love these things. It's that she no longer needed objects to remember who she had been. Claire paused one last time in front of the piano. Then, in a gesture more ritual than practical, she placed the crayon version of Rainbow on top of the closed lid, like a flag folded for retirement. She clicked off the light and whispered, "Thank you for letting me speak when no one else would." Then she shut the door. That afternoon, Claire folded the child-coloured, rainbow sheet into thirds and slipped it into a small envelope. On the front, she wrote, "For Ellie," in her soft, looping cursive. She waited until the house quieted again, post-lunch lull, everyone upstairs or napping, and gently tapped on the door to Ellie's room. "Grandma?" Ellie's voice called, muffled but bright. Claire stepped in. The girl was curled up on the carpet, colouring in a unicorn book, her hair messy from a half-done braid. A soft tune hummed from her lips, something between a pop song and a lullaby. "Do you have a minute?" Claire asked, holding up the envelope. Ellie sat up, curious. "Is it a letter?" Claire smiled. "Kind of. More like a secret between musicians." She sat down beside her, handed her the envelope. Ellie opened it and gasped. "I remember this. You drew this with me. The rainbow song." Claire nodded. "You didn't need sheet music back then. You just made it up in colour." Ellie looked at the paper like it was a treasure map. "Can I keep it?" "It's yours. Always was." Ellie hugged her without asking. Claire closed her eyes for a moment, her arms wrapping around something that still believed in magic. A knock at the door. Melissa poked her head in. "Hey, everything okay in here?" Ellie held up the sheet. "Grandma gave me music." Melissa smiled, polite. But her eyes flicked to Claire, narrowing slightly. "We talked about not pressuring her into lessons again, remember?" Claire didn't respond. She just placed a hand on Ellie's back. No pressure, just memory. Melissa hesitated, then nodded and left. Ellie looked back down at the page. "I want to play this again someday." Claire kissed the top of her head. That's the best kind of someday. She stood to go. As she reached the door, Ellie called out, "Grandma?" "Yes." "You're still music, even if you don't play right now." Claire's breath caught, not from pain, but from recognition. Harold's words echoed in the back of her mind. "Let them remember you in colour." Claire sat cross-legged on the floor of the study, a cardboard box open beside her. Stacks of books formed quiet towers, gardening guides, choir history, cookbooks with folded corners. On top of one pile sat The Giving Tree, its spine softened from years of reading to Ellie, and once upon a time to Melissa. She moved deliberately, sorting into keep, donate, and ask first. The donate pile was winning. She heard footsteps approaching. Then, "What are you doing?" Claire looked up. Melissa stood in the doorway, arms crossed, brow furrowed. She looked more confused than angry. "Just tidying," Claire said softly. "Some of these are ready to bless another shelf." Melissa stepped closer and picked up a book near the top. "The Kitchen Year. I gave you this for your birthday." Claire paused. "And I've cooked nearly every page. It's ready for someone else to love it now." Melissa didn't respond immediately. She glanced around the room. The open boxes, the missing framed photo from the wall, the cleared corner where a reading chair once sat. "Are you getting rid of everything?" Claire met her eyes. "Not everything, just what I don't need anymore." A beat of silence. "You could have told me," Melissa muttered. "Would it have changed anything?" Claire asked, not unkindly. Melissa looked away, then down at the book in her hand. "I guess not." Claire reached over and placed a folded note on top of the keep stack. Melissa noticed the handwriting. "That Dad's," Claire nodded. "He wrote it after I lost my voice for 6 weeks. Said books and songs were how I still spoke." Melissa looked like she wanted to say something, but she didn't. She just placed the cookbook back in the keep pile, quietly. Then, without looking up, "Don't give away your song too soon, Mum." And she left. Claire sat in the stillness. Her hand hovered over The Giving Tree, then moved it from donate to keep. Some endings could wait just a little longer. The frost had kissed the garden overnight. Claire stepped outside, wrapped in a knit shawl, boots crunching softly over the gravel path. The rosemary was drooping, the basil long gone. Even the mint, usually defiant, had browned at the edges. She knelt beside the raised bed where Harold had planted lavender, their first spring in this house. She ran her gloved hands over the brittle stems. "Gone woody," she whispered. "You'd have pulled it out weeks ago." She retrieved her small garden shears from the shed, brushed off the rust with an old cloth, and began snipping slowly, not out of frustration, but out of ritual. The clippings she laid gently into a basket. The compost bin was half full. The ceramic frog by the hose had lost one painted eye. The faded sign that read "Claire's Garden, established, 1996, leaned to the left. She straightened it, just for today. The bird feeder still hung from the old maple. A lone sparrow picked at the last seeds. Claire watched it for a moment, then refilled it from the sack inside the shed. "I won't be here for the next thaw," she told the tree. It didn't answer, didn't need to. In the corner of the yard, a small fig tree stood bare. It had never fruited much, but Ellie liked to sit under it in summer with a book. Claire picked up a rock and wrote, "Fig tree, Ellie's shade" in chalk. Just a whisper of memory, left behind. She clipped the last rosemary stalk and stood slowly. Her knees ached more than they used to, but the ache felt earned. She took one long look at the whole garden, closed her eyes, breathed in the wintry scent of earth, mint, and memory. Then she whispered, "I always thought I'd die here, but not all roots belong forever." She walked back inside without looking back. The clippers stayed in the basket. Claire stood outside the half-closed door to the den, a stack of her scarves in hand. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but the voices inside were louder than usual. Not shouting, just emotionally full. Melissa's first. "I told you she's packing the books. The garden's empty. She's going." Jacob's voice. Quiet. Conflicted. "She hasn't said anything directly. Maybe she's just reorganizing. Maybe," Melissa cut him off. "She's not. You don't reorganize your identity unless you're leaving." Silence. Claire didn't move. The scarves hung loose in her arms, one slipping slightly. Melissa again, softer now. "I didn't grow up with a mum who stayed, Jacob. Mine left when I was 6. My dad raised me between paychecks. I never had to share a kitchen or deal with anyone rearranging my cabinets or sitting silently in the room like a shadow with feelings I couldn't read. Jacob, she wasn't judging you. I know that now. But I didn't back then. It just felt like I was always messing up." A pause. "And when you said she might live here for good, I panicked. Not because she's bad, but because I didn't know how to make space for someone like her. Someone who remembers every date, folds napkins like prayers, and watches without correcting." Claire felt her breath catch, not from anger, from clarity. Melissa's voice trembled slightly now. "I was trying to protect what I thought I could control." Jacob didn't respond. Claire stepped back, her foot grazing the floorboard. A faint creak. She froze. Inside, both voices went quiet. Then Melissa whispered, "Do you think she heard that?" Claire didn't wait to find out. She turned, walked quietly down the hall, and placed the scarves into her suitcase. Folded, not shaken. The suitcase was zipped, the piano closed, the books sorted, the scarves folded. Claire moved like someone who knew exactly where each goodbye belonged. She placed one envelope in the centre of the dining table. Not dramatic, not hidden, just there. It didn't say farewell or please understand. It said only no pressure, just memory. Same sentence she'd told Ellie when giving her the crayon music sheet. Now it meant don't chase me. Don't rewrite the past. Just remember, I was here. She looked around the kitchen one last time. The kettle Harold had bought her for their 30th anniversary. The fridge magnet that read, "Choose quiet." The dented measuring cup Melissa never liked, but Ellie always used when baking. Claire smiled, not because she was happy, but because she was full. She slid her key into a small dish by the front door, tucked behind the unopened mail, then walked out without checking if anyone was home. Outside, the morning was cold but kind. She paused by the fig tree, brushed her fingers along the chalk writing, Ellie's shade, then stepped into the cab. Inside, the note stayed untouched for hours. Jacob rushed through to grab car keys. Melissa wiped the counters without seeing the envelope. Ellie walked in, paused, and tilted her head. But before she could reach it, someone called her upstairs. The house moved on. Claire did not. The cab pulled up to a modest brick building on the quiet side of town. Claire stepped out, paid the driver, and pulled her small suitcase to the door. Apartment 3B. No doorman, no front garden, just a keypad and a metal mailbox. Inside, the hallway smelled faintly of paint and takeout. Muted. Lived in. The apartment was small, maybe 400 square feet, but clean. A twin bed, a table with 2 chairs, one window that looked over the alley, where a mural of jazz musicians brightened the red wall across the way. Claire placed her bag down gently, then stood for a moment, taking it in. There were no voices, no creaking floors above her, no Ellie giggles, no Melissa humming to a podcast, no Jacob asking where the olive oil was, just the hum of the refrigerator and the muted rhythm of city life below. She opened the cabinet. 2 cups. One chipped, a single ceramic plate, a tea kettle, newer than hers, but lacking history. In the closet, 2 hangers. She placed her coat on one, folded her scarf over the other, then sat by the window and looked out. A boy on a skateboard passed by, a woman carrying dry cleaning, a man adjusting his mask before stepping into the coffee shop. Life moving, unaware she had arrived. She pulled out a small leather-bound notebook, the same one she'd started using after Harold passed. On the first clean page, she wrote, "I made it. No one noticed. That's okay." She paused, then added, "But I noticed. That's enough for today." She closed the book, set it beside the window, boiled water in the kettle, brewed a small cup of cinnamon tea, and sipped slowly, the steam curling into her face like the first safe breath in months. The table was set for 4. Melissa had made her garlic salmon again, the one Claire used to say was a little brave for a weeknight. Ellie helped set the table, 2 forks each, napkins folded in rectangles, but not the way Claire did it, diagonally, like tiny tuxedos. No one mentioned it. Dinner began, light talk about Ellie's school project, a new co-worker at Jacob's firm, Melissa's gym trial, not one word about Claire. Jacob tried to eat. The salmon was good, the wine dry, the light over the table warm, but his eyes kept drifting. To the 5th chair, the one still tucked in, the one no one had dared move. Next to it sat a stack of unread mail, where Claire's reading glasses used to rest. Ellie dropped her fork. Jacob reached for a napkin from the drawer, pulled one out, and paused. It was folded diagonally. Only one. He stared at it. Melissa noticed. "What's wrong?" Jacob shook his head. "Nothing. Just... this one's folded like Mum used to." Melissa didn't answer. Ellie looked up. "I think Grandma made that one." Jacob nodded slowly, then glanced at the chair again. He remembered a Christmas 3 years ago, Claire laughing at something Harold had said, the way she'd held her wine glass with both hands, like she was warming them, the way she hummed under her breath while slicing pie. Now, nothing, not even her voice in the room. Jacob felt it like weight. Not heavy, just Wrong. He placed the napkin on his lap, but didn't eat again. The room moved on, but something in him hadn't. Claire opened the balcony door. The afternoon air smelled like bakery sugar and city concrete after rain. Below, the alley bustled with the quiet noise of other people's lives, a florist sweeping petals, a delivery guy making 3 trips to the same door, a boy chasing a paper airplane, laughter from the coffee shop terrace. None of it involved her, and that, she realised, was okay. She wrapped her shawl tighter, leaned against the cold railing. The mural across the alley, jazz musicians in full colour, caught the light just so. Their horns seemed to glow. Their eyes smiled in brushstrokes. Claire sipped cinnamon tea from her chipped cup. No one had called. No voicemail. No text from Jacob. No photo from Ellie. Not even a forwarded chain email. She checked twice, then stopped checking. Instead, she pulled out her notebook. Opened to the last page. She wrote, "I thought disappearing would feel like punishment, but it feels like choosing the sound of my own breath again." A pause. She added, "Maybe I wasn't written out. Maybe I just stepped off stage for a better scene I get to write." She smiled, not bitter, not triumphant, just true. A neighbour across the alley waved. Claire waved back, then sat and listened. To wind on metal fire escapes, to a soft piano from a window upstairs, to the breath of a life still hers. Ellie sat, cross-legged on the floor of the guest room. She wasn't supposed to be in here. Claire's old space was being turned into storage, according to Melissa. But no one was home yet, and curiosity had pulled her in. A small box of books rested near the closet. Ellie lifted the top one, A Child's Garden of Verses, the one Claire used to read to her when she was sick. She opened it. Inside, between 2 yellowing pages, was a folded piece of music paper, the kind Claire always used for her colour songs. Ellie opened it slowly. It wasn't music, just a single line in Claire's handwriting. To remember, someone is to hear their silence on good days. Ellie stared. The handwriting looped softly, the ink slightly smudged, but it was her grandmother's, without question. She touched the paper, then held it to her chest. A faint piano note came from the hallway. Not real, just memory. Then she whispered, "Grandma always said, quiet things are the ones that last longest." She folded the page again, slid it into the zippered pocket of her sketchbook, next to a leaf she once picked with Claire in the garden. The door creaked behind her. Melissa's voice called, "Ellie?" Ellie didn't answer right away. She placed the book back carefully, then stood and whispered one more thing to the room. "I didn't forget you," and closed the door. It was raining again. Claire sat near the window, a soft instrumental playing from the neighbour's speaker next door. Jazz, maybe, or something like it. She sipped her tea, the last of her cinnamon blend, and opened her journal to a random page. Halfway down, in her own careful handwriting, was a line she'd nearly forgotten. "To remember someone is to hear their silence on good days." She stared at it, then whispered, "I told that to Ellie when she lost her first pet. Back then, it was meant to soothe a child's sorrow. Now, it reached straight into Claire's own quiet ache. She gently traced the sentence with her index finger, following the loops and curves like a map. Something about it felt returned, like the words had gone out into the world, made a home in someone else, then circled back. She closed her eyes. Faintly, she imagined Ellie's voice. Quiet things last longest. Claire smiled, not because she was remembered, she didn't know if she was, but because she had said something once, and it had mattered enough to stay alive somewhere. That was enough. She turned to a fresh page, wrote in slow strokes, "Maybe we don't leave echoes. Maybe we become them." Then, below that, for Ellie. In case she ever reads this, I wasn't lost. I was learning how to be still. She closed the notebook, set it beside the tea, and listened. Not for a call, not for a knock, just for her own breath, steady and certain. Melissa stood at the kitchen counter, rinsing blueberries into a glass bowl. Ellie was at the table, quietly arranging napkins for tomorrow's dinner. It was just them. Jacob had stepped out. The TV murmured faintly from the living room. Melissa glanced over, then froze. Ellie was folding the napkins diagonally, just like Claire used to. Melissa wiped her hands on a dish towel and approached, slowly. "Where did you learn to fold them like that?" she asked, trying to sound casual. Ellie shrugged. "Grandma. I always liked hers better. They looked like little tuxedos." Melissa stared at the neat triangle, then picked one up and held it. Software still, faintly scented with lavender from the drawer. She set it down, pressed her palm flat against the fold. For a moment, she didn't speak, then whispered, mostly to herself, "I never noticed she always did them that way." Ellie looked up. "She said it made people feel special, even if it was just dinner." Melissa nodded, but her mind was far away. She remembered the Christmas Claire had brought napkin rings. Melissa had rolled her eyes, thought it was too formal. Said so, out loud. Claire had just smiled. "It's just a small thing, but small things show we cared." Melissa sat down, looked at Ellie. "Do you miss her?" Ellie: "Yeah, but I don't think she's gone." Melissa tilted her head. "What do you mean?" Ellie held up a napkin, smoothed the triangle, then tapped her chest. "She's right here, in little things." Melissa blinked, nodded, but said nothing. She reached for the next napkin, folded it, slowly, the way Claire used to, and laid it gently beside Ellie's. 1 week later, at the family house, a small brown package arrived in the mail. No name on the return label, no note inside, just a folded linen napkin, it's a triangle style, and a tiny glass bird, blue. Ellie opened it, held the bird in her palm. "It's her," she whispered. Melissa watched from the doorway. "Are you sure?" Ellie nodded. She used to say bluebirds were good luck. She had one on her window. She placed the bird on the dining table, right in the centre, then folded the napkin, carefully, like Claire had, and smiled, not in joy, but in recognition. In her apartment, Claire stood at the balcony. The air was crisp. The city glowed below. She didn't need to call, didn't need to visit. The gesture was enough. She opened her notebook, wrote the final page. I gave them a story, one they might remember in tea leaves, folded linen, and small glass birds. A pause. She added, "The house didn't remember me, but she did. That's enough." Claire closed the notebook, tied it with twine, slipped it onto her bookshelf, then grabbed her coat, locked the door, and stepped outside. She passed the mural. The jazz one, the trumpet now glinting in the late sun. At the corner, she paused, not to look back, but to breathe and walk forward.